All right. This is 5.8, a continuation of where we left off. We started 5.8 the other day. We're going to continue. I'm going to recap this paragraph before we start answering questions, just so that way we're refreshing. My brain today is a bit like foggy. I'm not sure why. You guys ever have days where just like your brain's just not? Usually it's on Thursdays. Today's Thursday. Yeah. I just feel like Mondays, you're ready for the week to start. Rested over the weekend. Tuesdays, definitely feeling 2 late nights in a row because Sunday nights have a late night. Monday nights have a late night. Tuesday nights, I'd usually fall asleep early. Wednesday, have another late night. And then by Thursday, I'm just like, I'm exhausted. Fridays, you're like, no, the weekend's right afterwards. So some are already tuned out. But for me, my brain's a little foggy today. So if I have to repeat something, that's my fault. Hopefully, I won't. Hopefully, I'm able to cut right through it. Okay, it says local variables are variables that are declared inside a method, usually at the top of the method. Okay, these variables can only be used within the method and do not exist outside of the method. Parameter variables are also considered local variables that exist for that method. This is all a review. This is all stuff we've talked about before. It's good practice to declare any variables that are used by just one method as local variables in that method. I explained a couple classes ago one of the reasons why we do that is so that way we can reuse the variable name later, and you don't have to think of all these different variable names for thousands of lines of code. And maybe you're working a team and someone has been assigned to work on this method and someone's been assigned to work on this method or in this class and someone else in this class. But by creating this classification of everything and the scope of your variables, you can then work and not necessarily affect someone else's work, right? It says instance variables at the class scope are shared by all the methods in the class and can be marked as public or private with respect to their access outside of the class. Okay. They have class scope regardless of whether they are public or private. The public or private allows outside of where you've declared that. Another way to look at scope is that a variable scope is where it lives and exists. You cannot use the variable in code outside of its scope. The variable does not exist outside of the scope. Okay, try the following code to see that you cannot access the variables outside of their scope levels in the toString method. Explain to someone sitting next to you why you can't access these. Let's just run it first and then let's see what it is. Okay. I have this class called person. I then have two instance variables. One's called name and one's called email. I then have my constructor here, where in the main method, eventually when I'm creating objects, I'm going to pass in two arguments, which then become parameters here. Okay, and we're assigning them to the instance variables. I then have a toString method. Okay, it says there's a for loop. You initialize I to 0. As long as I is less than 5, keep going through the loop. And then it says int ID is assigned whatever I is. It says, can you access the block scope variables I or ID? I at the end of the loop is, and then it lists I. The last ID is ID. Okay. Can toString access parameter variables in person? And it returns these variables. So what we're eventually going to be doing in the main method here, we have our constructor. We're creating a new object. And we're adding in Sana, which is our first argument, and sana@gmail.com, which is our second argument. And then we're printing out what we see. So it says there were errors. So you cannot access, right? You cannot access it outside the for loop because the scope of I is limited to inside this for loop. Okay. Also, ID, right? The scope of int ID is limited to inside this for loop. Okay. I also have a problem. It says when I'm trying to return this right here, when I run line 31 and it goes up here and I'm using my toString, right? Return init name. It won't allow you to do that. Okay. So what does it ask me to do here? It says try to fix the errors by either using variables that are in scope or moving the variable declarations so the variables have larger scope. By either using variables that are in scope. So what we need to change, I guess, first starting off, I at the end of the loop is, and maybe we create maybe what I can do is I can say private int ID, and then I can just say ID is assigned I. And then that would allow me to also edit line 20. I at the end of the loop is, and then the ID. Let's see if that fixes that. Okay, that did. So now it's saying in line 24, at the very end, we're returning, and it says cannot find symbol return init name. So what we want to return is not init name. It would be return name and then return email. So line 24, those are my variable names that I used. Init name and init email were assigned to my instance variables name and email up there. Okay. Let's run that. Let's see if it fixed that. Okay. I at the end of the loop is 4. The last ID is 4. And it gives me my new person and their email address. Checking that code contains declaration and initialization of ID to 0. Okay. So it wanted me to initialize ID to 0 up here. You didn't need to, but I guess it wanted me to. All right. Once again, whoever wrote these few lessons, not a fan. It says if there is a local variable with the same name as an instance variable, the variable name will refer to the local variable instead of the instance variable as seen below. We'll see in the next lesson that we can distinguish between the local variable and the instance variable using the keyword this. We'll talk about that next lesson to refer to this object's instance variables. So in this example, the local variable is used instead of the instance variable, the same name. Will the code print out? So I have my person class. I have my instance variables, name and email. I have my constructor, which receives these two parameters, assigns them to the instance variable. I have my toString method. It says I have string name is assigned to unknown. The local variable name will be here. It says the local variable name here will be used, not the instance variable name. And then we're returning name there. So what we've done is we're inside of this. The scope of this is saying, hey, look, I'm going to create another variable called name. Even though we already have a variable called name, they can't think of another variable name. So they're like, hey, I'm just going to name it name. And then it says string name is assigned unknown. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so this overwrites and says, hey, look, that name is going to be whatever you just told me, unknown. Let's say I wrote it with a capital U, right? It would show up with a capital U down there. But this overwrites, right, refers to name there. It chooses that one. Okay. String name is assigned unknown. That's the one it thinks that's the variable name it thinks that you're using. Okay. So maybe overwrites is the wrong word. It chooses this one and it uses this. Okay. Debug the following program that has scope violations. You may need to add methods or use methods that are in the class fraction appropriately. Then add comments that label. Okay, so let's look at the code. Has scope violations. So I have a class called tester class, then my main method. And I'm creating an object, an instance F1 and then F2. In this one right here, I'm not passing anything into it. And in this one, I'm passing 1 and 2. I'm then printing F1. And then this is using F2.numerator divided by F2.denominator. Let's look inside the fraction class first. Have my instance variables, numerator and denominator. It says set instance variables to default values. So this is my constructor here. I'm passing in, it says int d is assigned 1. Okay. Numerator is 1. Denominator is 1. So these are the default values. My constructor, if I'm receiving these two parameters here, using these two parameters, I then assign one to numerator and I assign one to denominator. So if you don't pass in anything, then the default is going to be 1 divided by 1. The default is that, and then if you want to pass something in, use 2 arguments. For the toString method, it says if the denominator is 1, then just return the numerator. That makes sense because anything divided by 1 is itself, right? So if denominator is equal to d, yeah, how's it supposed to know what d is? So the scope violation there is like, hey, we don't know what d is. So d should be if the denominator let's leave it there. Let me read through the whole thing. The new numerator is assigned 1. Where did new numerator come from? Yeah, so we have to figure out the scope of this right here. So I'm going to, if they want to use new numerator, I'm going to go up here at the top and say new numerator. That's what they want to use. And then I can take away in line 40, where it says int, I can take that away. New numerator. All right, so that's good there. New numerator is assigned 1 if denominator is equal to d. So we can say if denominator is equal to 1, I'm not sure why we would need new numerator there. So new numerator plus divided by denominator. Wait, if the denominator won't, then just return the numerator. So if denominator is equal to 1, then why would I need this in here? Sorry, I'm looking at this trying to figure out why I would need that. Oh, so I'm saying that it would only want to. So the new numerator. So it's saying that it wants to save time. And comments. I'm trying to understand the why first and the what it wants. The numerator is 1, then just return the numerator. Well, why would I need to write that? You see what I'm saying? So if you already are displaying the numerator over the denominator, why do you need to write a new numerator? They're trying way too hard in this. They're making this way too confusing. Like you don't need any of this in here. So if denominator is 1, then just return the numerator. But then we're not returning just the numerator, but then we're returning the numerator and denominator. Am I wrong? That doesn't make sense? It shouldn't be 1. If denominator is equal to 1, then the new numerator is assigned. That's silly. This whole example is dumb. New numerator. I'm not sure why it wanted that. We don't need to create a new numerator. Let me run it and let's just see what it like. Just keep on playing with things till we get what we want. F2.numerator. Oh, I see. Numerator has private access in fraction. I guess I'm going up to the. So up here, if I'm printing out F1, F1 will give me. I didn't pass anything in. So F1 would go here. It would set my numerator and denominator. And then my toString would say numerator over denominator. I don't like any of this. I'm working with too much Python. So returning toString, it would say the numerator over the denominator. Let's run it and see what happens. The numerator has private access in fraction. So we could say, if they want to use new numerator, I mean, I could put it as public, but I don't think that's what it's like trying to get me to do. It says numerator has private access in fraction. Like, yeah, like if you go up there and you were to, we haven't used any instance variables as public though. Right? Because then that lets you go through and do it, but it's saying that it wants you to start with 2 private variables. So we'll start with them private. And then testing 1 divided by 1. So it wants me to return if the denominator is equal to 1, then numerator is assigned 1. Is that what they wanted? Which doesn't really make sense. Yeah. It says private access. So if I have I'll restart with the original of what they had. So I had this, and I had this down here. Okay, this is what they originally had in here. If I run their original code, I just went back to here. You can click there and automatically get the original. Anyone have any potential solutions here? I don't understand really why they want it done this way. And I think that's what's keeping me from doing it this way. Let me reread. Debug the following program that has scope violations. Yes, there are scope violations. You may need to add methods. Okay. You may need to add methods or use methods that are in the class fraction appropriately. Okay. So but it doesn't really give me like exactly what it wants. It's like, hey, look, this code has errors in it. We haven't told you what we want it to do. So before reading through this, if I run it, numerator has private access in fraction. I'm going to skip over this because I don't like how this was originally even structured. We can go back to another time. Yes, Josh.
Well, I added a new denominator as well as a new numerator, and I made the numerator and the denominator public, and made the new numerator and the new denominator private, and that seems to not give me an error at least.
So you made a new numerator and a new denominator?
Yes, like in the classes.
Like that?
Kind of, but I've moved them all the way up into the class, like right under the instance variables. I made them instance variables.
Okay. But then I can't think that kind of just like defeats the purpose of even writing like Like, why wouldn't we just write them as numerators, and why wouldn't we just write it as numerator and denominator if we're going to just use them at the class or use them at the class level, right? To me, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I'm just not even going to move forward with that. I think it's more confusing. If it's confusing me, I don't know why we're doing it, right? We did talk about scope. I don't think they did a good job. What I'll do is over the weekend too, I'll look at some better examples that I can show you next week, but it's just not a good example. Like, it doesn't give you enough clarification. It doesn't tell you what it wants you to do. Like, programming challenge, usually it like gives you a basis of instruction. If I'm looking at this for the first time and I have no idea what it wants me to do, I know you can use context clues, but even using context clues, I still don't know. But okay. Moving on to the AP practice part. It says, consider the following class definitions. Which of the following best explains why the class will not compile? Okay. I have 2 instance variables, boxes of food, and num of people. When the party class, this is my constructor here, when it's passed in people and food boxes, we're reassigning them to num of people and boxes of food. Public void, order more food. I'm being passed in additional food boxes. If I'm looking to order more food, that's what that method does. And it then updates the amount of food with however many boxes of food there was, plus the additional boxes. And then boxes of food is assigned the updated amount of food in the end. Sorry, I'm reading through this and I'm wondering why they didn't just, they could have saved a line of code right there. Not sure why they wrote it in 2. Public void, eat food boxes, eaten boxes. That's if a food box gets eaten. Which of the following best explains why the class will not compile? A class is missing an accessor method. The instance variables box of food and num of people should be designated as public instead of private. The return type of the party constructor is missing. The variable updated amount of food is not defined in eat food boxes method. Updated is not defined in eat food boxes. Updated amount of food. And updated amount of food. Yeah, so check this out. Updated amount of food only pertains. Hi.
I was going to say something to you because I didn't realize you were talking.
Okay. You're good. Whatever. Whatever you want me to do. Yep. Oh, that's fine. Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, so if we look at this, updated amount of food is declared right here. And then updated amount of food is not declared in here. If we want an updated amount of food to be used in different methods here, we would need to declare as an instance variable. So that's my guess is not define and eat box of food. D, correct. Consider the following class definition. Private int current price and private int movie rating. Okay, so if I have P being passed into here and R being passed into there's my constructor. I have current price is 16, return current price. Print price says get current price and then runs it. Which of the following explains why the print price method is broken and only ever prints out a value of 16? The reason is because here, when you get the current price, we're always assigning it to 16, which is overwriting this variable here. So it says the private variables, no. The private variables current price should have been declared public. No. The print price method should have been declared as private. No. Current price is declared as a local variable in the get current price method set to 16 and will be used instead of the instance variable. Correct. So it's D. 8 out of 8 completed. Well done. I just don't like this one. I'm sorry. I just don't like it. I think they could have done a lot better job to explain this in a simpler way. Or given me more instruction. I like details. I'll try and find better examples for you guys over the weekend, and I'll bring them in. I'm sure at the end, like when we do like the summary stuff, I'm sure they have some better examples in there. The this keyword, 5.9, this keyword. The keyword this can be used in a class to refer to the current calling object. For example, in the following class person, when we create an object P1 and call the constructor or set P1.setEmail, the word this refers to P1. And when we make the same method calls with object P2, this refers to P2. Run the code below and also check it out, right? So let's look at it first. So I have a class called person. I have my instance variables, name, email, phone number. I have my, guys, I have my constructor. I have my constructor, and I'm passing in please don't talk when I'm talking. I have my person, I have my constructor here, which passes in the name. Check this out. So it says this dot name. Why? We'll expand on it here in a second. Okay. If I use a getter, get name, I'm returning this name. If I have get email, I'm returning this email. To go back, why am I using this? Okay. In the class person, when we create an object P1 and call the constructor, or we set an email, it refers to this P1 and not object P2. Okay. So this phone number, this. In our main method, I created a person called Sana. Okay. I passed that in, and that's the one argument that's passed into that class there. If I were to print out P1, let's just run it. Okay, if I run it, it prints out Sana null null. Okay, because I didn't set the email address or phone number. Person P2, I have assigned a new person, okay, a new object called P2. I set email to gene@gmail.com. And then I set phone number, and then I print out P2. And it allows me to do that. So that way I'm not getting any information confused, right? This phone number, this email, this name, and it's not confusing with P1. Okay. Note that in the code above, this name, this email, and this phone number are equivalent to writing just name, email, and phone number. But this dot variable is a way to indicate that we're referring to the instance variables of this object instead of a local variable. Okay.
This is kind of like input keyword in Python, right?
What's that?
This keyword in Java, it's kind of like the same as input in Python.
Not quite. I'll explore that later with you. Static methods cannot refer to this or instance variables because they are called with class name, not an object. So there is no this object. The keyword this is sometimes used by programmers to distinguish between variables. Okay, programmers can give the parameter variables the same names. This is what I was talking about, where, sometimes we might run out of variable names. So you can use this, right? This name, not the one that's up there. I want to refer to this name and not have to write N as my variable name. I could write it as this name here. Check this out. So this name is assigned whatever name is. I could pass in name, right? And then have that stored there. Instead of saying string N, right, when I was passing things in, this is just now expanding your knowledge of this, right? Instead of passing in string N and saying name is assigned N, we were doing like init email, init name, init phone number, right? You could have just not done that and think of like, what should I name this? Should I name it N? You can just say, hey, look, this name. So this basically you can keep name and that will assign it to name up here. Okay, programmers can give the parameter variables the same names as the instance variables, and this can distinguish them and avoid a naming conflict. This is an example. So like we could go back and instead of writing init email, we could have just said string email and wrote email here and said this email if that matched up with the instance variable version of email. The this variable can be used anywhere you would use an object variable. You can even pass it to another method as an argument. Consider the classes below, pay and overtime. The pay class declares an overtime object and passes in this, the current pay object, to its constructor, which computes the overtime, how much overtime you're making with respect to that pay object. Try this code in the active code exercise below. Here is an image that shows how this, my pay, and P all refer to the same object in memory. Okay. It says what happens. So I'm going to run it and then read through. So I have a public class called pay. I have my instance variable double pay. As double P is passed in, right, I could say pay and then say this dot pay, and that would put it in there, but they decided to do it this way. It says public double get pay returns the pay. And then it says public void calculate pay with overtime. And it says overtime OT is assigned new overtime. I guess we have an overtime class down there. Yep. And it says we're passing in this. And pay is assigned whatever get overtime pay is in the main method. So let's go to the main method and then work out from there. Okay, which is right here. So I have my pay, new. So I got paid $100. Okay. My pay dot calculate pay with overtime. It takes, it goes to the pay class, looks for calculate pay with overtime, which is right here. And then from there, it passed in 100. My pay calculate. It passed in 100 as, okay, to pay, to assign it. So I then immediately go to overtime and it passes on this. And if I go down to overtime, it says private double pay with overtime, my instance variable. I then have my constructor, which notice it says pay P, because I passed in this right here. I passed this in. I passed pay in. So I'm passing that in there. So it would say pay with overtime, P dot get pay. So it looks for P dot get pay, which is up here. And I'm then able to use the pay class inside of the overtime class, and allows me to use the same methods and all of that too. So I've passed in all of that information, calculate pay with overtime. Instead of worrying about variables and all that, I can pass the entire class into here by using this, right? And receiving it as pay P. And what it eventually calculates is 150. So if I'm getting paid 100 and I'm saying, hey, look, this is pay with overtime, it receives that, goes to my overtime class, passes in the 100. It uses the get pay method and says, hey, 100 times 1.5. So half of 100 is 50. So 100 plus 50 is 150. I then can use the get overtime pay method to return the 150. That then gets sent to get pay. And by doing that, I then am returned 150. Okay, we're not going to use this very often. This is not used, or sorry, we're not using this very often on the AP exam, but it is something that you should know and something we're going to get more practice with as well, the more that we go through this. If you see it for the first time, don't expect to fully understand it. It may take a while using it in several instances, especially when it comes to the end of unit questions. Okay, it says consider the following class definitions. I have a class called pay. It says private double pay. It's my instance variable. I then have my constructor. It says public pay. I passed in P, which is assigned to pay. I also have get pay, which returns the pay to my getter. And then I have this method, calculate pay with overtime. It says this pay object is passed into the overtime constructor. Okay, so the entire object is passed into overtime. Pay is assigned OT dot get overtime pay. Okay, so I am going to get overtime pay inside of here. I passed in whatever that is. multiplying it by 1.5. The following code segment appears in a class other than pay or overtime. Okay, what if anything is printed as a result of executing the code segment? Okay, so pay is passed in 20. Calculate pay with overtime. So if I go up to calculate pay with overtime, that then passes it in there. I passed in 20. Okay, 20 times 1.5 is 30. Pay with overtime is then assigned this. If I go to ot.getOvertimePay, that should give me 30. D? Correct. All right. That's a long problem to have to go through, right? If that's like an AP exam question, you have to follow all that through. But it's good to take it slow, work through one step at a time. Okay, we're passed in 20. 20 goes to get pay. Multiplying it by 1.5 gives me 30. Then I'm calling the get overtime pay, which returns that pay with overtime. Oh, by the way, Greg came into my class the other day and just wanted to show me of the one section where in class I just said, yeah, we're going to skip this. We were looking at we were like, hey, when did we see this in 5.1 or 5.2? Why was this not completed? It was because I just said we're not going to do this, and I forgot. There you go. I don't think it's necessary to do all of this stuff. I think some of it's overkill and some of it doesn't give enough explanation. And the problem is when you have curriculum like this, different people write different sections of the curriculum. So like sometimes people assume you know things that we haven't learned yet, or they're just not very good at explaining things. So just know that especially Unit 5 has been kind of a, I don't think anyone wanted to do Unit 5, so they passed it on to people that didn't want to do it. And in the process of it, it just looks like it could be better. I'll leave it at that. It could be better. So I'll look for better examples. Yes.
To better understand, because in the pay, the pay class, we have overtime OT is equal to new overtime this.
Right here?
Yeah. This keyword in that line, is that trying to only like isolate that variation of overtime? Because like if you had multiple different if you had multiple pay objects and you had different values for that, if we use the overtime and it has this in it, is that just that variation of it?
Well, it's just passing in the pay class as an object.
Okay.
So it's just like, it's a shortcut, right? This is a shortcut that they teach you. And I have a book at home. I forget who wrote it. I forget the full title of it, but it's like something about like a cookbook for Python shortcuts. And like, it's like, you already know it. Once you learn how to like write programs and do all this, right? You learn like the basic way at first, and then you start to find like shortcuts, like ways to just make things easier. So like, I don't fully believe in teaching you shortcuts until you know how to do something completely. So like, for example, if I have, if I'm teaching you math, right? I want to teach you like the full way of doing something before teaching you the shortcut to appreciate the shortcut even more. But also I don't want to confuse you by teaching you the shortcut first. And so I feel like in this, they're introducing shortcuts when maybe you still need to be learning some of the basics and reinforcing that more. I'm sure they're trying to find a place to put some of these shortcuts in. But yes, in this case, this is a shortcut that this is used so that way you can just pass it in there, and it's another way of writing it, right? Yes. So I'm lecturing right now, but what's the exact problem?
Turning in.
How to turn it in?
Yeah, I watched the video, and then like when I went to put it in the thing, it like opened the weird.
Yeah, don't open it. So just say save to your computer. Don't open it whatsoever, and then upload it to the turn in your work.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. If you try opening it for some computers, it'll just make your screen keep flashing. We don't want that. All right. Does that help?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. So this one right here, I'm just going to start at the bottom and work up. Okay. We're passing in 20. 20 is being put into received as P. P is assigned to pay. Pay is my instance variable. So pay is 20. Okay. Then it says calculate with overtime pay, or calculate pay with overtime. So I have new overtime. I'm passing in pay here. Oh, that's the same example. I thought that was another one. See what happens when I go back. Programming challenge. A bank account can be used to store your money. The bank keeps track of the account holder's name, the account balance, which is the amount of money in the account, and assigns an account number to each account. At the bank or an ATM or on a phone app, the account holder can deposit or withdraw money from their account. Here's a video that shows steps to use an ATM to withdraw money. Phone apps like Venmo and PayPal connect to your bank account. For this challenge, steal money from someone else's bank account. It's like, that'd be fun. Sorry, legal and ethical. Cannot do that. If you steal money from people's bank account, make sure it's Greg's, because he has a ton of money. And he can definitely, in his personal bank account, hundreds of thousands of dollars, he can afford. He won't notice if you take just a little bit of money. Huh?
I would notice.
You would notice. Says create a class called bank account below that keeps track of the account holder's name. Let me read through this first and see if I want to do this. Write two constructors for the class, one that initializes all the instance variables and one of the parameters, blah, blah. All right, we'll start it. All right, create a class called bank account below that keeps track of the account holder's name. Let me get out my writing utensil. Which have all seemingly disappeared. Okay, keep track of their account holder's name, the account number, and the balance in the account. All right, so this is my class bank account. I'll say private, and I guess it'll be a string. And I'll say name. I'll have a private int, and I'll call it, this is for the account number. So I'll say account num. Said ACCT num. That's what I decided. And then the balance. Probably don't want int, right? Probably want a double for the balance. What if it just like rounds, right? Okay, so those are my instance variables. It says write two constructors for the class, one that initializes all the instance variables and one that only has two parameters for the name and account and initializes the balance to 0. So we want to write a constructor receives 2 of just the name. Oh, sorry, one that does all 3, and a constructor also that only does 2, and then initialize the balance, so the balance to 0. Okay, so my constructors. So if we look back, right, at all our examples, whenever we created our constructor, we need to make sure to make that public. Okay, we also need to make sure it's the same name as this. So I'll say public bank account. And the first one is going to pass all 3 in, right? So I'll say string. How does it want me to do it? I'll say string name. I'll say int count num, and I'll say double balance. But what I'm going to do is when I assign these, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to say this name is assigned name, and this count num is assigned count num, and this balance is assigned balance. Okay, so that will, rather than me naming this N, A, and B, that allows me to put that in there. Okay, the second constructor is if I pass in only 2 parameters, bank account, string name, and int count num. And let's determine the scope of this. So I would say this dot name is assigned name, and this dot account num is assigned to count num. Then also I would say the balance is assigned 0. Right? It says for the parameters, use the same variable names. Use the this keyword to distinguish between instance variables. We already did that. Does that look good? I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out later. Write a toString method for the class. Use the this keyword to return the instance variables. Okay, so if we go back, right, just I always like going back just to review what we've gone through. Have we? I guess we didn't end up writing. Yeah, so if you look back earlier in this lesson, when we returned this dot name and this dot email and this dot phone number, right, we were able to write public string to string. So if I go up here, I'll say public string to string. And we want this to return, use this to return instance variables. So I'll return this dot name plus this dot count num plus this dot balance. Let's see what else. Write a withdrawal amount and a deposit amount method for the class. The withdrawal method should subtract the amount from the balance. Okay. So a withdrawal and a deposit. So I'll say public void, we'll say withdrawal. And it needs to be passed in how much is actually being withdrawn. So we'll say, what does it want? It wants amount. Okay. And we'll also write, I'll copy this. We'll say deposit. We'll write each. So I have a public void withdrawal and a public void deposit. On the public void withdrawal, I'm going to take whatever the amount is and I'm going to subtract it from whatever the balance was. So I can say balance is assigned to, I guess I need a semicolon up here in line 23. If you guys want to put that in there, I just saw that right here. You're going to subtract whatever the amount is from the balance. Okay. And then down here, we're going to take the balance and we're going to add that amount. Okay. Let me check up here if that's what, I mean, we could, if I want to continue using,
Have we declared the amount?
we haven't written the main method yet. So double amount is passed in here. Okay. So we're using amount in here. What else does it want us to do? The withdrawal method should subtract the amount from the balance as long as there is enough money in the account. Okay. It should subtract the amount. If so, we'll say if balance is greater than or equal to amount, then we subtract the balance. Because if you're subtracting and you get a negative amount, we can't do that. All right, so if balance is greater than or equal to the amount, then we can subtract from the amount. Okay. Deposit should add the amount to the balance. We did that. Use the this keyword to refer to the balance. Okay, so we want this to refer to the balance. So I could say the same here in line 18. Wants me to write this dot balance. Also down here, this dot balance. Down here, this dot balance. Down here, this dot balance. Make sure it's not being confused. Test. Test your class below with a main method that creates a bank account object and calls it. Okay, so I'll say public static void main string args. So if you look back previously, when did we end up doing that before? We wrote one with, so making sure that when we're writing our objects, right, this main method can be inside of the class. It can be inside of either class, but the program looks for the main method first. Okay, so when you have a main method, that's really, and we've said this before, but that's really where your program starts. That's what it looks for first. So all the stuff we just wrote would be useless without a main method. So if we go back here, what it wants us to add in the main method is creates a bank account object and calls to deposit. So I'll say the class, we named it bank account. So I'll say bank account. I'll just call it B1 is assigned new bank account, semicolon. And then we want to say B1 dot says calls its deposit and withdrawal methods. So maybe we deposit. Remember, deposit, it's accepting a double. So let's deposit.
What do we want to, sorry, for the withdraw and deposit methods, what do we want to return the balance afterwards?
You're saying, okay, so when you get down here, being able to, I was waiting for it to like ask there to be some sort of like if there was like a getter or something. I wanted to see if there was anything, but it looks like it's not. It says, and prints out the object to test its toString method. That's what the toString would do. Right, so the return would be in the toString. Mm-hmm.
Should we create a variable for Greg's bank account?
For what?
So that we can like say deposit Greg.
Deposit Greg.
Yeah, like, well, if we're gonna get into his bank account, we need to have his bank account. So like, we should create another variable.
Wait, so I'm gonna understand what you're saying.
So like, if we're going to get some money from Greg's bank account, we need to have a variable that has his money in his bank account.
So we're gonna deposit $1 million in Greg's bank account.
No, out of his bank account. So like with maybe like deposit Greg, and then Greg's number is the variable that is Greg is the number of dollars in his bank account.
Well, I guess the withdrawal and deposit methods don't actually they don't actually return anything, right? It's just we write them. Just let's go through this and let's see what we can do. So depositing $1 million in the bank account, right? And then let's withdraw $1. Was it withdrawal or withdrawal? Oh, it was withdrawal. Sorry, no L. No L. So look, line 26, take away that L. If you guys didn't right now, you're smart. Withdraw $1. Okay. So now if you're looking back to right up here in our code, what we did was they had a getter in that example there. But if we want to return I mean, I guess I could just do that print line. I think that's what it asks anyway. You could say system.out.println v1. And if I'm printing that out, it should print out name, account number, this balance, all squeezed together. If I wanted to do something like this, account number, maybe I just add another colon there. Okay, I'm sure somewhere along here I made some sort of small mistake. Never know until you run it. And then we'll trace through and find it. It's saying no suitable constructor found for new. Oh, I have to pass it in information first, I guess. So it says name, account number, and balance. I didn't pass any of that in. So I could say I'll use Vivian. And I'll pass it in. The second one, it needs an account number. So the account number will be 54321. And the balance, I guess to start off with, I'm sorry, it's a double. So it's also going to receive a double here. So I'm going to write .00. How much money to start off? I'll say $1. So $1, I'm going to deposit $1 million, and then I'm going to withdraw $1. Okay. Let's see what that works. Let's see how that works. I like a lot of green there. That looks good. All right, so let me explain what I did. It printed out Vivian's account, 54321. She has $1 million. Let's say instead of $1, instead of $1 million, let's say I'm mean and only deposit $5 in her account. Okay. What that does is it well, let me withdraw more. I'll withdraw $2. We'll run it. Okay, so she starts off with $1 in her account. I deposit $5 to give her $6. Then I withdraw 2, and that gives me $4. Okay. Mr. Danza, how do you format it so that way it's actually 4.00? Good question. You could make it like float and write 0.02 and make that work, but we'll bypass that for now. Let me walk through my code, explain what I did. So I started off with the bank account. Okay, the class bank account. My instance variables. Okay, I have my. I'm wanting to write my hash symbol for comments. I have my bank account, which is this is my constructor for 3. And this is my constructor in case only 2 parameters were passed in. This is my toString method. This is where everything's returned, right? This is my withdraw method. This is my deposit method. There's my main method. What we did was we ran it. Vivian 54321's passed in $1. That then is accepted by the first constructor because there are 3 parameters: name, account num, and balance. Those are then stored under this.name, this.account num, this.balance. Isn't it nice not having to think up of all these new names for variables, right? There you go. We can store them in there. We did that there. And then balance. We also want to make sure it's something as serious as a bank account information. We don't want to mix up with someone else. Like, let's say that like I have $0 in my account and someone else has a bunch of money and I go to withdraw and it accidentally goes to someone else's account. Wouldn't that kind of suck? Right? That's not good. My toString method there returns this name, this account number, and this balance, not someone else's. And then if this balance is greater than the amount, we're not going to run it. Maybe then we could respond back and be like, hey, you don't have enough money in your account to withdraw that amount. How to deposit money in your account. There you go. Okay, AP practice. It says public class liquid. I have my instance variable. I have my constructor. I have get current temp. I have also a method that adds liquid to jar. It then passes in Okay, so saying liquid jar. So liquid jar should be above it, but okay, so liquid jar gets passed in. I'm going to read this part first. So I'm creating liquid as water. It's a new liquid, and I'm passing in 50. When I receive 50 into liquid, that is stored as the current temp. I'm going to write this down. So the current temp is 50. Okay. Then I have a new liquid, water. So water is 50. Milk is 15. Okay. Those are then received by the instance variables. Then I create a new object, J, and I say water dot add to jar J. So I'm adding to jar. Let's look at add to jar. So I'm passing in J, which is liquid jar. So that gets passed into add to jar, and add liquid is assigned this liquid jar J. Interesting. Milk. If anything is printed out of the execution of the code. So my options are 50, 15, 65. Nothing the code segment attempts to access the private variable current temp outside of its scope, or nothing the code segment attempts to access the private variable total temp outside of its scope. Let's look. Get total temp. Get current temp. So I'm going to look at add to jar. If add to jar is past J dot add liquid this. So it would go down to add liquid and would take get current temp and add it to the total temp. Maybe D. E. F. G. H. I. J. K. It's C. So, okay, so C, the answer is 65. Correct the liquid water with a temperature of 50, and then the liquid milk with the temperature of 15 is added to the jar. So if you look back through, you guys are good to go. If you look back through, 50 is added, 15 is added. You add both to the jar, you add water, you add milk to the jar, and the total temp is going to be 65. There you go. Yep, see ya.